Hi everybody, hope you are well. This is Gav, your host. I thought I would jump on and say hi, but also a reminder just to say that if you are liking what I'm doing here with the veterans, you can support this podcast financially with a little bit of money. You can do that in two ways. One is through patreon.com. You can set the amount per month. Whatever it is, as little or as much as you so wish, would really, really, really help the show. The other way is a one-off payment through Buy Me a Coffee. And so, yeah, you can choose how many coffees you do buy me in that instance, but it would be really, really helpful. So the money would go back into the podcast directly, not into my pocket. And that would be for the equipment, for travel. It would also be for the remote recordings. So all of that would help. And, I'm going to be honest, I might even buy myself a coffee actually when I travel. I need to stay awake on the road, right? So some of these trips from where I am in the UK do take a few hours, but I like to get there in one piece, if you know what I mean. So if you do want to help support the show, you can do it. Those links are available through the website or through the social media bio link thing that you've seen me talk about on those means. So yeah, if you do want to help, that would be great. But if not, that's fine. Continue listening. But every little helps, as Tesco's say. That's a big supermarket in the UK for those not in the UK. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. Talk soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Welcome to episode 20 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Richard Foster. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Gav. Good to talk to you today.
Good to talk to you too. How are you doing today?
I'm great. And I don't think it's as hot here as it is where you are.
No, yeah, because we're doing another remote recording, which is excellent. And you're over in the USA. Whereabouts is that?
I'm in Georgia, which is, of course, southeast United States. I'm from Texas, where it's a whole lot hotter, but it's not bad here. It's only about 80 degrees Fahrenheit here, and I believe you're a little bit hotter than that.
Oh, there's that Ring doorbell again. So you got some busy people. Don't worry about it. I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, talking about the heat. We're on day 3 of 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's not normal in the UK in September, because we are recording this episode a little bit earlier than it's coming out. So yeah, it's blooming hot over here, I tell you.
Okay.
But as I said to you earlier, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to hear about your time in the military. And as previous episodes, we do have 4 questions, and I'm going to ask those shortly. But before we get onto those, was you known as any other name in the military, nickname, for example?
Yeah, I was known as Rick when I was younger. So all my friends call me Rick.
Okay. So I know you as Richard, but I may revert to Rick because it's easier.
That's absolutely fine.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to jump in on the 4 questions, bullet point answer, and then we'll get into the heart of the show very, very shortly. Okay, so the very first question is, when did you join the military?
I joined the military in April of 1966 at 17 years old.
Nice. Very, very young. I was 16 myself, so we've got a connection there. And
Okay.
what service and branch did you join?
Joined the Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps. I felt like that was the best, and I wanted to be the best at the time, and so that's what I did.
Awesome. The third question is, how long did you serve for?
For 4 years. I did a 4-year tour. Half of it was in Vietnam, and the other half was in Washington, D.C. So I went from mud and blood to pomp and circumstance.
Well, I'm really excited to hear what that looks like. And last but not least, what rank did you get to in the military?
Sergeant E5.
Sergeant E5. Brilliant,
Yes.
brilliant. Okay. Well, if we get any more of that Ring video doorbell, we may have to pause again. Um,
Okay, you may need to pause. I can stop that if you want to pause.
okay. Well, we'll see how we get on. But this is just natural, right? This is real life. Everybody's got these
Well,
Ring doorbells nowadays. So there we go. There we go. Well, let's just rewind. Let's go back to the very beginning. So where was you born and where did you grow up?
well, I grew up in out in West Texas, United States, in very small towns. My dad was a country vet, and my whole life was in the country,
Okay.
and so it was a very rural environment.
So you mentioned country vet.
Yes.
Is that veteran?
Well, well, my dad was a veterinarian, and
Oh, veterinarian.
he just was basically worked with large animals in the country.
Okay, okay. Now I had to clarify that because when you say vet in the UK, they normally think of veterinarian, but
Uh,
in the US, it's kind of like, well, a lot of people say vet to veterans, so it's worth just clarifying that. So
okay.
you yourself, you were around a lot of animals. Did you kind of like follow your dad out to work or anything occasionally?
I went with him all the time. I spent lots of time on ranches, and I helped him quite a bit with operations, and I got pretty good at it myself. In fact, we did a lot of cesareans on cows in the middle of the night out in the middle of a pasture somewhere. And I got to where I could do the whole cesarean myself and get the calf out. And he would
Wow.
just watch me. The only thing I didn't like was that first cut. That was just, I don't know, that just bothered me for some reason, the first cut. So I made him do the first cut. And once I got inside, I was fine.
Wow. So with that in mind, did you have like maybe any inkling to maybe go down that route and follow in your father's footsteps?
Well, I was really too young to know. I think more than anything, I wanted to go in the military. I had the military in mind for a long time, and
Okay.
I didn't know if I was smart enough, quite frankly, to go to veterinarian school. That's a tough thing to do, and at the time I didn't think I was smart enough to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I had also the kind of like wish to join the military because my dad was in, but at the same time I had the kind of like maybe wish to become a veterinarian, but I knew I wasn't brainy enough. So very similar to
Ah,
you. Very similar to you. That's crazy.
well, that is crazy.
So that's cool. And then you grew up a little bit more. And what was school like for you? Did you enjoy it?
School was terrible for me because I did not enjoy it. Uh, it all seemed senseless to me. I was reading stuff and studying stuff that to me had no connection with the real world. And I was extremely rebellious. And so I did not make good grades. In fact, I made terrible grades and I was in trouble all the time. So that's the way I
Okay.
went through high school.
Right. And so what kind of enticed you to join the military? Was there an instant or was there, I don't know, a different family member that made you want to take that step?
No, I'd come in late one night from drinking and driving too fast. Why I didn't kill somebody driving drunk? We all did it as kids. That's just what we did. We drank all the beer we could get our hands on and drove as fast as we could. Cars, beers, and girls in that order. That's what we were interested in. So I came in one night and the TV was on and they were showing the fighting in Vietnam. And I knew I was going nowhere where I was at home, and something just clicked in my mind. It was like a light bulb went off. I said, "That's what I need to do. I need to go," and that's the moment I made the decision.
Okay. So are you 17 at this point when you see that news part? Yeah.
I just turned 17.
Just turned 17. Wow. So what you were seeing on the news back then, was it kind of what we're seeing on the news or were seeing on the news over here within Afghanistan and Iraq? Was it that kind of vibe?
Yeah, it was basically the vibe was the same. It was black and white, and of course, very low quality at the time. And it was the evening news report. Actually, it was a 10 o'clock news report. that was played over and over several times, but it's basically the same.
Okay. And so what was it? What did you see that you felt you needed to get out there and help? And was that what it was? You wanted to get out there and help or serve the country?
I actually saw Marines out there in the field. They had cameramen out there during a short firefight, and I just felt like that's what I should do and what I needed to do, and that's what I wanted to do. And it was just obviously I'd been thinking about it for some time, but when I saw that, and the commentator came on and said how the fights were increasing and Marines needed help and all of America needed help over there, and something was going to have to be done to escalate the war. It just bang, it was time, and I was ready to go.
Okay. And then what does that look like? How did you back then sign up to the
Well,
Marines?
well, first thing I did was call the Marine Corps recruiter, and he kind of led me through the best way to tell my parents that's what I wanted to do. And so I talked to my mom and dad one night at supper, and I just said right out of the blue, I want to join the Marines and go to Vietnam. And I'll never forget my poor mom. She dropped her fork. It was a total, complete shock to her. And after a short discussion, my dad said, well, I know why he wants to go. He wants to go because we can't afford college and he's not getting anywhere here and he wants to do something for his country. So I understand. But he said to my mom, he said, let's just wait a couple of weeks. He said, he'll probably change his mind. Well, 2 weeks later, the Marine Corps recruiter was at my house and I was signing papers and they were signing papers with me. So it didn't take long.
Oh wow! So people, these kind of recruiters would come to your house and do the
Yes.
paperwork there.
Yes.
There's no office to go to like nowadays.
Well, there was an office, but you didn't have to go. He was more
Oh,
than glad to drive out to our house and have me sign up.
I guess they were really after people to sign up back then, weren't they?
Oh, big time.
Yeah. And so you signed the paperwork with your parents and then headed off to training. And I believe the Marines call it boot camp. Is that right?
Yes, went to Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego.
Okay, San Diego. And what was that like for you? Was you already a fit guy, and then training was fairly easy, or did you have a steep learning curve?
Well, I thought I was fit, but I really wasn't. It was a complete and total shock. You know, I had no discipline in my life. I was wild and rebellious and extremely irresponsible. No one had been able to control me, but the Marine Corps. I realized as soon as I got there, I didn't have any choice but to do what they said, and it was quite a shock at first. I was sorry for the first couple of days. I realized, ooh, I think I made a mistake here. Too late, so.
Yeah.
But it was very good for me, and it was extremely strict and extremely difficult. And
Now I know it was. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I was just going to say that I smoked at the time, and it was very difficult physically to do everything required,
Yeah.
even at 17.
Well, I was going to say, I know it was a little while ago now, but was there a moment that stands out in your mind from training? Maybe an exercise or maybe a physical training period that stands out for yourself?
Well, it was all hard. I think the rifle range probably stood out more than anything because they rushed us through boot camp because of Vietnam. They really needed us in the field, and normally it was 12 weeks. Actually, it had at one time been 16 weeks. They shortened it to 12, and then when I was there, they shortened it to 8. So the drill instructors had a lot to do in 8 weeks' time. But the Marine Corps spent 2 full weeks at the rifle range. That's one thing the Marine Corps prides itself on is marksmanship. And I was fortunate enough to get the right training and concentrate enough, and I qualified as expert. And I think that was a highlight of a boot camp for me was going to the rifle range and being able to do well.
Nice,
Uh,
nice. So you mentioned expert. Is that like the top level?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, cool. We I think we have our top level as marksman.
Oh,
So having expert as a top level over there
okay.
is kind of
And
cool.
in the Marine Corps, you have marksman, which is the lowest level,
Really?
and then sharpshooter is the middle level, and expert's top level.
Oh wow. Okay. Maybe the UK's just flipped it around. I have no idea, but I was aiming to become a marksman. So
Okay.
so strange that it's flipped the other way. That's so cool. So cool that this podcast is teaching us.
Well, every country's different.
Absolutely, absolutely. So hey, you finished training. Then you knew you were training to go out to Vietnam, and what was that moment like?
Well, it
Yeah,
was
how did you get out there?
actually it was a disappointment because I was still 17 and I couldn't go to Vietnam. They wouldn't send you until you turned 18.
Oh,
So they sent
okay.
me to North Carolina to Camp Lejeune, and there was the group I was in was about to leave on a 6-month Mediterranean cruise. The Sixth Fleet kept a group of ships in the Mediterranean all the time, and they were about to leave, and so I joined that group, and so I spent 6 months in the Mediterranean aboard a ship,
Okay.
and
And yeah,
and
what
that
was
was
that
pretty
like?
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It-
What kind of jobs would you do whilst you were out
well,
there?
well, I was a rifleman, and they stuck all of us down in the very bowels of the ship. And I don't know if you've been aboard a ship like that before, but they had racks stacked like 6 high, hung on chains, and and of course it smelled like a laundry room down there, and it was hot all the time. Even though we were over there in the winter, it was still hot down in that part of the ship. So the living conditions were bad, but it was fun to cross the Atlantic and go through the storms we went through. That was interesting, and then see the beautiful blue Mediterranean and all the countries that surrounded the Mediterranean. I'd never been really anywhere. So for a 17-year-old kid, it was a pretty exciting trip to go on.
Nice. So that was your first time away from the States.
Yes, it
Um,
was.
and did you actually go to land, or was you just
Yes.
on the sea?
Well, we pulled Liberty and a lot of ports. Probably spent more times in Naples than anywhere else. But we went to Toulon, France, and we did operations on Corsica and Sardinia, and so we just traveled all around the Mediterranean, and we did a lot of liberty. So got a lot of good memories of that. It, it was kind of fun. It wasn't what I wanted. I was ready to go to Vietnam, but if I had to go somewhere and do something, that was a pretty cool place to go and do.
Yeah, it sounds like a good start to your career.
It
And
was.
did they know that you wanted to go to Vietnam?
Oh, of course. Well,
They knew.
I I didn't have to tell them because they were anxious to send me.
Oh, okay, okay.
They needed people in Vietnam, so they didn't need. I mean, they could send anybody on a Mediterranean cruise, but they needed guys in Vietnam. All they could get.
Fair enough. So you come back to the US and then you travel out to Vietnam. Is that
Yes,
right? And
yes.
then how do you get out there? Do you fly to different countries first?
We came back to North Carolina and disembarked on the ship. I went home for a short leave, and then flew to California and went through something they call staging, which was a uh, about a 1 week course where they tried to teach us some extra survival skills for Vietnam. They We shot pop-up targets with the new M16 because we had always used M14s before then, and M16 was new to us. So they taught us how to shoot the M16 and how to shoot pop-up targets, and how to skin rabbits, and how to handle yourself if you're a POW, and stuff like that.
Okay, okay. So it's like a bit more training before you actually went.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was about a week, it maybe two, but it was a short period of time.
And then your first time on the ground in Vietnam, what did that feel like and what went through your head?
Well, when we landed, I think the biggest shock when we landed, I had a window seat. We'd flown over on a Continental 707 that was chartered by the Marine Corps. We'd flown from Okinawa, and we landed in Da Nang, and I was amazed to look out the window and see all the activity. I'd never seen anything like it, not even in a movie. There were F-4 jets taxiing for takeoff, loaded with bombs and missiles. On another runway, there were other fighter jets landing with parachutes dragging behind them. There were C-130s everywhere, loading and unloading. There were helicopters coming and going. It looked like total chaos, but obviously it was pretty controlled chaos.
Mm.
But it was a very, very busy airfield, and we were obviously in a war zone. That was my first impression. I said, "Ooh, we have really landed in a war zone."
Yeah, yeah. And so as soon as you land, what's that next step look like?
Well, when they opened the door, it just knocked us over. The heat and humidity. You think it's hot in England right now? Ooh, it was unbelievable. And as we stepped outside, not only was it hot and humid as we were walking down the stairs of the plane, but there was dust everywhere from the helicopters that were just all around us. And so you had the heat and the humidity, and you had dust. And we walked into what they said was the air terminal, which was just a plywood hut. It was had screens in the top half and plywood in the bottom half and a tin roof. That was the air terminal. And you walked in there. I think my biggest surprise was it was the least Marine Corps thing I'd ever seen in my life. Marine Corps is spit and polish all the way. If you walk around a base, you know, your boots better be shining, everything has to be straight, and you're clean, etc. I walked in there, and the clerk sitting behind the counter was eating a sea ration meal, and he finished it. We had to stand there while he finished eating. He just kind of looked at us and grunted. He finished eating. He threw it over his shoulder at a trash can back behind him that was already overflowing, and it just fell on the floor. There were cigarette butts all over the place, dirt, filth. It was the most un-Marine Corps-like thing I'd ever seen in my life. So I was shocked to see that. So that was my first impression of the Marine Corps in Vietnam.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a real shocker when you landed there. And then did you get taken straight to your unit? I'm guessing that's what you call it when you get out there.
Oh, we did. We were in a rear area, which was Da Nang. That was extremely rear for us. Da Nang was only used for coming and going to and from the States, or if you went on R&R. So we were taken to some temporary housing and told to just go find a place to bunk until they called us. And it was a huge complex of huts, maybe 200 or 300 or 400 huts. It was just huge. It was acres of huts. When they assigned us a hut, and I went to the one I was assigned to, and there was a vet laying in there on his way home, and he was the only one in there. And I took my duffel bag and I threw it on the cot, and dust went up, and he let out a long list of cuss words.
Right.
and I think that's when I first realized that the attitudes were really bad, because he looked at me, and I asked him, I said, "Oops, sorry about the dust. What about showers and food and all that kind of stuff?" And I could tell immediately he had a very bad attitude. His hair was longer than it should have been. He hadn't shaved recently. He was filthy. I mean, I had on green, what we call utilities. The Army calls them fatigues. I don't know what you guys in the UK call them. But anyway, I had on nice, clean green fatigues, and his were brown with dirt, just totally brown with dirt. And he told me to not expect any luxuries here. And this was a rear area. He says, "You're going to learn to love this area, but there's no bedding, there's no sheets, there's no pillows. There is a shower down the way, but it's probably cold if it's not out of order." And he said, "If you go take a shower, the first thing you need to do is take off your underwear." I said, "What are you talking about?" I thought that was the strangest thing I'd ever heard in my life. He says, "We don't wear underwear in Vietnam. It's too hot. You can't keep it clean, so throw it in the trash can after you take a shower." And he said, "There are no heroes here. So my last piece of advice to you is to keep your head down. Now shut up and leave me alone." And that's the way that episode occurred. So
Wow.
I learned right away that the attitudes in Vietnam were not very good.
Yeah. So that's like another level to welcoming you to Vietnam.
Yeah, that
That's
was my welcome, and
that's crazy.
I was very surprised. I was surprised at the filth, and surprised at the attitudes.
So you're out there, and I believe you're out there in total for 2 years. Is that correct?
The tour of duty was 13 months in Vietnam.
13 months. Okay, okay. And I'm. It sounded like, and from what I know, and I'm also just going to say apologies if I ask a stupid question, because I'm quite a young British soldier here, and we weren't really involved, but you were always busy, from what I can gather. There was always missions and tasks. So how long was it from you landing before you were out either on a mission or going to do a task?
Okay, well, we had to leave Da Nang after a few days, and then we went to Dong Ha, which was another rear area. In Dong Ha is where we were issued our weapons and ammunition. We had to stay there a few days, and then we were boarded on a convoy and shipped over to a place called Cam Lo, which is up front on the DMZ. And that was my first time out in an actual combat zone. The rear areas, even though they got incoming from time to time, they were really not considered a combat area. But for the first time when I got to Cam Lo, that was considered a combat area. Everyone walked around with loaded weapons, and it was you had to stay on alert all the time. And before I even got to my assigned unit in that base, we were hit with incoming. So that was my first experience with any kind of incoming whatsoever. It was artillery rounds, several rounds fired from the north, because we weren't that far from North Vietnam.
Right, right. And I know you went through all that training and everything, but was there an internal bit of fear from yourself, or was you well trained and therefore knew what to do if something like that did happen?
Well, the only thing you can do with incoming is just lay still. If there's a ditch nearby, if you're lucky enough, if you're not out in the field, if you're lucky enough to have a ditch nearby, you can jump in the ditch. But otherwise, there's nothing you can do but just lay there and be still, and hope that it's not your number that's called up. You can hear the shrapnel whizzing around from the exploding rounds, but there's nothing you can do. You can't fight back. You can't. You certainly should not run, because that you got to stand up to do that. So you just lay there, and so that was my first experience, and it happened so fast I almost didn't even know what was going on for a moment. But you learn real quick, and all you can
Yeah,
do is lay there and pray and hope your number's not up yet.
yeah, yeah. And so, was there an experience or a story you can share from within that 12, 13 months that you're out there?
Ooh, well, there's an awful lot of stories.
Let's pick two that really stand out to you.
Well, we were in combat almost constantly. The the time we spent in a actual compound was limited. I mentioned that I went to Cam Lo for the first time, but most of the time we were out in the field on an operation. And during the operation, we would just um, hump through the wilderness. Sometime it was jungle, and sometime it was just low brush, but most of the time it was a combination of the two. And so we were in constant combat, and it was rare for a week to pass by that we didn't have some kind of contact with the North Vietnamese Army, which of course we call the NVA. We didn't have a lot of contact with the VC, which stood for Viet Cong. They were guerrilla fighters. We had some contact with them. Occasionally at night they would hit us, but most it was the NVA full scale attacks, ambushes during the day. Um, we were in, gosh, I was in so many battles to pick two of them. Um, uh, that's kind of hard to do. I guess Con was the first of it. Con was under siege. It was our base right up on the north, on the on the border between South and North Vietnam. You could actually see North Vietnam from Con, and we were under siege. We received hundreds of rounds of artillery every day at the base. And at night, we would go out on what they call listening post, which was just a suicide mission to go out. And you were an early warning device, is what it amounted to. And we would go out in teams of three and sit and listen and watch and try to keep the enemy from coming in unannounced to the Marines behind us at the basic Con. And we had to fight several times out like that. The NVA would sneak machine guns up close to us and open fire, and they didn't know where we were, but they knew where the base was, so they would open fire on the base, and we would return their fire, and they were usually surprised to find us out there, and quite often most of the time they would disappear as soon as we started firing at them. But probably some of the biggest battles as far as gunfights were concerned. One of the biggest was on April 30th. Near our rear area, we were actually helicoptered over to an area near Dong Ha, and we were involved in a fight with the NVA that was dug in, and they were waiting for a fight, and the fight lasted basically all day long, and we just tried to work our way around their holes, and they would pop up and shoot a couple rounds, and then they would pop back down. So at one point, I laid my rifle across an embankment that I was behind, and I waited for one of them to pop up, and I was able to shoot him, and I swung my rifle to the next hole to get the next one, waiting for him to pop up, but he already knew where I was, and he was already shooting at me. So I just kind of wiggled back down in the dirt, and it went like that all day long. And we had to recover our wounded in the battlefield while they were still shooting at us. And sometimes we would make it off the battlefield with wounded, and other times we'd be shot while we were trying to get off the battlefield. And one or two of the guys helping us carry a wounded Marine would get shot. But there were so many battles like that, it's almost impossible for me to pick one or two because there were so many, and it was constant.
It sounds like it, ongoing, constant. And I mean, these are going to be stupid questions. I apologize, but I just want to know. And there's probably other people out there that are in the similar mindset. But it's constant. It's day. You mentioned they try and ambush you at night. When did you get to sleep? Was it sentries that were put out to try and protect you whilst you got some shut eye?
Well, no, we were the sentries. There were usually 3 men to a hole, and I say a hole. When you're on an operation, what you do, if you can imagine this, you're out there walking, and you're in the jungle, and you got leeches to deal with, but mostly you got rain to deal with. Rain, and you're trying to go up and down mountains, and you're slipping and you're falling. And at the same time, you're trying to stay ready to engage the enemy if we run into an ambush. And at night, we would form a perimeter, and everyone had to dig a hole. Every third, or there were 3 guys to a hole. So all 3 of us would dig a hole that were big enough for 3 of us to get into. And if it was raining, quite often the holes would fill up with water before we could finish them. But we kept digging anyway because we had to have something to get into in case we were attacked. And so it would depend on whether we were on 100% watch, 2/3 or 1/3. So most of the time we were on 1/3 watch, which means that two could sleep while one stayed awake. And so you'd get about 5 or 6 hours sleep a night. And so you would stand your watch and then wake up the next guy and etc. And there was nowhere to sleep except in the mud. So you just laid down and covered yourself up with a poncho or slept sitting up, which I did quite often.
Yeah. And then
And
how did you like maintain? You know, you mentioned about Marines being you know, spit and polish. You know, they're just always constantly clean. But out there, it's a completely different you know, environment. So you surely had to do something because you didn't want to be a man down with I don't know, like they talk about like cleaning your teeth or not shaving or anything like that. What was your kind of like routine of keeping things ticking over?
as far as staying clean, you mean?
Yeah, staying clean, like your rifle, and how did you clean that in that
Okay.
environment, and
Well,
yourself with just everything.
well, the rifles always stayed clean. We were we took good care of our rifles. We kept the mud off of them the best we could. If we got mud on them, we got the mud off of them. We carried a little small bottle of oil with us, and when we needed to, we'd put oil on the rifles. But we kept the rifles clean. We kept our ammo clean. Ammo we carried in bandoliers, which were cloth, but it was enough to keep the mud off of them. So we kept the rifles and the ammo clean. Hand grenades we didn't worry about keeping clean because they'd go off whether they were dirty or not. So we didn't care about them. Our bodies, it was not unusual for us to go 2 and at one time 3 months without a shower. So you can imagine how we smelled after being out in the jungle for a couple of months with no shower. Every now and then we would cross rivers and and form our perimeter next to the river. And if it was a fairly safe situation, we could race out there real quick and kind of halfway bathe ourselves. But most of the time, we were just filthy. We stunk. We
Yeah.
absolutely stunk. But of course, you get used to it, and pretty soon you don't realize you stink anymore till you go around someone that doesn't stink like you, and then you realize, ooh, I smell pretty bad.
Now, when people get trained in the jungle in this day and age, they're taught not to shave because a cut could, turn into an infection. Was that the same for Vietnam when you were out there?
Things not to say. I'm sorry. Ask the question again.
Apologies. So, in the current climate we're in now, so in the 2000s,
Yeah.
especially the Brits, when we go and get trained for jungle training, you're trained not to shave because you don't want to cut yourself, which can then turn into an infection.
Okay.
So, was that the same for you and your team out in Vietnam, or did you have to keep a fairly low cut or something like that?
Well, we didn't have time to shave when we were moving every day. You had to leave at dawn, and you didn't stop till dark. And there usually wasn't time to shave, but every few days, especially if it was felt like we were about to engage the enemy, they would have us stop and shave. And the reason for that was if our faces were to get ripped apart, the doctors didn't want whiskers on their faces. They had sent that word out. So if we knew we were going to be in an engagement, they would be sure that we stopped and everybody had to shave.
Okay.
Otherwise, we didn't shave until we got back into a perimeter with wire around it where we could actually take the time to do the actual shaving.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were on so many different tasks, and then you also just mentioned about being in a perimeter area. How long was each kind of like trip out the other side of the wire to do a task? Did they vary, or was it always a week or something?
I would say it was about 50-50, but you have to keep in mind when I say in a perimeter with wire, uh, that's nothing more than an outpost usually. It was a very, very small base. It was very comforting to us because we did have wire, and at least that would slow them down if they were to attack at night. And quite often we had small bunkers where we could actually get in a sandbag bunker if the or when the incoming started. So most of these bases that we were in were extremely small and uh, ex- extremely crude. But the good thing about them was they did have wire around them. We had trip flares set out so that if they did approach the wire, they would set off a trip flare, and we'd know that they were out there. So it was much better than being out in the field on an operation where you had no protection whatsoever. You
Okay.
just
And then you moved around by foot. Did you also move around by trucks? And I've seen like helicopters moving troops as well. So what did that look like for yourself?
all three. If we were on an operation, we were on foot the whole time. If they, for instance, if we were up north on the DMZ and something happened back to our rear area, which was Dong Ha or Da Nang, they would usually send CH-46 helicopters over and they'd pick us up and they'd race us over there so we could get off and take care of the problem. There were routine convoys that went back and forth. So if we were at one of the main perimeter bases, the convoys would come every couple of days, and so there was a lot of convoy. If you needed to go to a rear area for some reason, you could get on a convoy and go to a rear area. Of course, that really wasn't your option. The only time you went to a rear area was either you were going home, you were wounded badly, or you were going on R&R. And that's the only time you got on a convoy to go to a rear area. Otherwise, we flew from point A to point B by helicopters and then on the ground by foot all the time.